Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video. Today we're looking at the Sharp by Design Evo Typhoon. This is going to be sort of a review and discussion, but I also want to bring up the fact that, look, this is an expensive knife, and I wanted to talk about why and when I feel justified in spending more money. Now, obviously, other people have some different opinions, but hopefully I'll be able to share with you some insights or offer you some thoughts that you may be able to apply to your own knife purchases, right? Because there are so many knives out there, and in a perfect world we could just buy every single good one, but for most of us that's not realistic. At least I know for me it's not. So that means we've got to be a little bit discerning, and hopefully we can think through some of that discernment process in this video. The first thing I want to say about this is normally I don't sign up for pre-orders. It bugs me when I have to go through some process, some series of steps to get a knife. I want to be able to just go buy the knife I want at a store and be done with it. This is not a knife that's that way, and I was happy to compromise my rule for this because I love this design. I find this to be one of the most attractive knives available out there right now. I love Brian's work. I'm not really a custom guy, so I'm not going to get a custom, but I absolutely appreciate his ability and his design. And some of that ability has been brought to bear on this knife because it is using his proprietary detent system, as well as like his cues on the blade grinding and all that kind of stuff. Um, so. What I want to do is work my way through this knife, talk about why I love this particular build, why it's so fantastic, and apply those things kind of as we work through the video in terms of why I'm happy to pay a little bit more. So the first thing to say is, yeah, I do love this particular knife. There were a few different options available. There was different blade shape, there were different inlays, and in fact, there was a previous run of the Evo Typhoon as well that I missed, and I was pretty disappointed to have missed it, although this particular configuration wasn't available, and I love this configuration. So I'm kind of, while I'm disappointed that I missed it, I'm kind of glad that I got it. Let's start off with size and weight the way that we normally do, even though, I've already gotten into some of the philosophical side of the discussion. Size and weight on this is 8 and 7/16, 3 and 3/4 inch blade, 4 and 11/16 on the handle. So that's the closed length, meaning that, by the way, the blade to handle ratio on this knife is really quite good. All right. The other thing that's really impressive about this knife is it's not a massive, massive knife. It's just a hair under 8.5 inches, but it's got tons of grip area. I've got a huge amount of real estate for my hand here. The other thing is it doesn't weigh a crazy huge amount. It's only 4.2 ounces, which is, a little heavier than maybe the same knife if it was in fully G10 or something, but that's not difficult to carry at all. And so size and weight, blade to handle ratio, all of that is just great. And, those I feel like, if I'm going to spend money on a knife, I don't really want to compromise on those things. And so here I definitely don't have to. I can get the knife that's right in my wheelhouse in terms of size, that has tons of blade length, which I do really, really like, and has lots of room for my hand, which is something I often find myself complaining about or concerned about. Even on some of the larger knives that I have, I sometimes think, I wish I had a little more handle real estate here. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, look at this blade. I'm sure there will be some people who look at this and go, yeah, it's okay. But to me, this is absolutely stunning. This is truly artwork. The multi-directional grind lines, the fuller, the harpoon tanto is just fantastic. Really, really attractive blade here. Not only attractive, but let me add, also quite functional. Having a hollow grind here where you're going to be slicing like cardboard or cheese or whatever the case may be means that this slices really, really well. And then out here at the tip where you're concerned about breaking the knife, you've got that extra strength. Now, I did recently have someone talk about breaking a knife this way, and I'm like, okay, I don't know how you cut things, but I normally cut them like this, which means the force is primarily directed that way. I guess sometimes you may try to pull some material out of a gap, but that's not a common knife usage for me. For certain outdoors tasks, making a spoon or a divot in a piece of wood, I guess it could be. Anyway, for my purposes, and I think for the vast majority of cutting tasks, a hollow grind is a great way to get really, really good slicing performance. And a compound grind gives you the extra strength you want at the tip where you could potentially be concerned about breaking the knife. So this blade has a couple of things going on that I want to point out here. We've talked about the fuller and the drama that it adds to this knife. The Harpoon Tanto is great, but also I love this very Brian Nadeau looking choil here. The cutout kind of extends into the flipper tab a little bit. Really, really interesting way of doing that. And Brian does that on a number of his knives, and it's a great feature. Now, that also contributes to the way the flipper tab functions, and we'll get to that later. Before I leave the blade, though, I got to point out a couple more quick things. First of all, M390 steel and a little bit of jimping up here where my thumb lands, both of which are really, really welcome. And of course, Riyadh does a great job with heat treatment, so I'm not the least bit concerned about that. There were other blade options, by the way. I went with the Harpoon Tanto. There were, I think, 2 other blades that you could have gone with, and I'm just not remembering off the top of my head what they were. Let's move on, though, to the action. We've already kind of talked about that, beginning with this flipper tab that's pretty proprietary to Brian and the way he does things. One, it makes for a very attractive and interesting knife when the knife is closed. You can see Brian Nadeau's maker's mark right there, but it also makes for an extremely comfortable flipper tab. Your finger kind of lands right into that little groove and deploys the knife perfectly every time. Just really, really nicely done. In addition to the way the flipper tab is done, of course, this is on bearings. And if you take a look in here, try it. There you go. You can see how there's that milled piece of steel that's part of the lock bar insert. That is how detent is generated. And so it's a little bit of a different feel, but it's a really, really nice touch. One, it's a nice touch because you're incorporating the detent into the lock bar insert, which is a really nice move. The other thing is he adds this little piece to the lock bar insert, which allows me to get a little bit of an edge for my finger to land on. Really, really well thought out when it comes to the ergonomics of this lock and the flipper mechanism and all around how I'm going to be touching and using this knife. The ergonomics are really, really well thought out. The one complaint is that I have, and I guess it's a little bit unfair almost to call it a complaint, but the one complaint I do have about this is going to be the bearings. Now, I like the bearings. I like the action. It's very smooth. It's very fast. It's very enjoyable. But I do wish that a lot of these higher end knives would go to dual row ceramic bearings or roller bearings. I just think it's, you're making something unique and special, and I would like to see something unique and special in the pivot. And I do think it impacts performance. The difference is notable in terms of how a knife feels, and more importantly, in terms of how much side to side force it can manage. All right, having that very minimal surface area provided by the single row bearings is not as good as having the larger surface area provided by either dual row, which is a little better, or better yet, roller bearings, which is phenomenal. All right, so I wanted to throw that out there as well. Okay, moving on. So action, and again, these little things, the attention to detail, the thoughtful design, and the comfort, again, are things that I'm willing to pay for, that I expect to see on a knife that's in this price range, but are also, they're extras that add value to this knife and make it a little more interesting. And while I love the design, what I love is that the various design elements also serve a practical function, which is really, really cool. Finally, let's get to the handle, which once again is really, really good. So we've got 3D contour titanium with micarta inlay here, a milled clip. It's sort of a combination between a milled and spring clip. It's clearly milled, but it sort of has that bent shape that functions really, really well. And of course, the lanyard attachment point is integrated into the handle, which means, from the presentation side of the knife, really from the lock side, which is also fantastic, it doesn't diminish that look in any way. Or take anything away from the design. And so because this knife has a particular design, because it has these cool little features, I'm happier to pay for that. Now, if I were to get my hands on this knife and it was uncomfortable and the action was terrible and I couldn't find a good spot to put my hand, we would not be having this conversation. So where I really want to, one of the things that I really want to emphasize is it's got these cool extras that are functional and enjoyable, but it, it's kind of puts them together in a meaningful and attractive way. I want to share some other knives that I kind of feel the same way about, that I'm happy to pay extra for, that are in an interesting class, in this sea of titanium frame locks. And there are, more every single day. There are some knives that just stand out, that offer something really cool and really special, that they don't have to be super unique. The Benchmade Super Freak is a knife that's pretty easy to get a hold of. Yeah, it's not cheap. You're going to pay a little more than you will for a standard grip, but I think you might even pay more than you will for a 20 CV grip. However, it's got some cool stuff going on. It's dramatic, it's cool, it's interesting, and I think that does offer some extra value. Not to mention the M4 steel, which I'm a big fan of. All right, so that's a good example. Let me pull in a couple of others. Another really cool, dramatic knife is the We Knives Synapse. Look at that thing. It's just, it's striking in its look and its approach. And not only is it striking, but it's highly functional. And of course, in this case, we're dealing with a an integral knife, which again is sort of like, it's sort of like the detent system on this, or the blade grind, or the flipper tab, where Brian does things just a little bit different. This knife has some things that are a little bit different. It's integral. The action is phenomenal, but I also love the way that We has done, and really, that's not the only one they've done this with. Their approach to integrals are really, really good because they don't ask you to make any compromises. So we've got a lock bar insert here, which is something that some people feel justified leaving out on an integral. The other thing is they've built this system so that you can kind of take it apart like a sandwich or like a tower that you're building from the bottom up, which allows maintenance of the knife. So again, here's another knife that I'm happy to spend more money on because it's got some really cool stuff going on. It takes that functional, desire that all of us look for in a knife and really adds to it. We've got a few more like that. Let's take a look at the Chavez 229 Tanto here with G10. Here's another knife that it's above and beyond. Right, it's not just a high-end titanium frame lock. It's offering some things that are special and interesting and unique. So much so, I will say, that I also have the Liberation. Now, we could argue the Liberation isn't quite so unique, but both of them are really, really well done. Again, I would point out all of these I think would do well with by upgrading that ceramic bearing pivot system. I'd like to see dual row ceramic, or better yet, roller bearings. I know that that's not, anyway, I'll just put it out there. Maybe somebody will watch this and go, hey, I think I could put roller bearings in here. By the way, I'm not interested in paying $200 for them either. I don't think it should be that much of a jump up in expense, frankly, to make that hole just a little bit bigger and pay like 5 cents more per bearing to have the dual row ceramics in there. A couple of other knives that I will put in here that I don't mind paying for. Of course, you guys know I'm a fan of Chris Reeve. I'm also a fan of Hinderer. I do have it in my, I have the intention of getting a Triway Pivot XM18. It just hasn't, haven't gotten around to it yet. The right knife at the right time hasn't come along. But there are other knives that I'm willing to pay a little more for. Here's a knife that does have dual row ceramic bearings, that has external stop pins, a lot of really, really good stuff going on with the Riot Torrent. Again, this is one of my favorite knives. I'm willing to, I kind of put it along with these knives, even though it doesn't have all of the special cool accoutrements that they have. It does do a pretty darn good job. So let's get those out of the way. You know what? I've got one more knife here that I think I should pull in because I love the design so much. This is the Monterey Bay Knives Old Guard. It's not a perfect knife, but it's pretty stinking good. And it does cost a little bit more than, you know, your budget-ish titanium frame locks that you might get from Kaiser or Concept or something. But again, I think there are a couple things about this knife that justify that extra cost. And that extra difficulty. These are hard to get. You're going to have to, you know, wait until they drop or something. Follow them on Instagram so that you know about that. Back to the Evo Typhoon. Um, I love this knife. I regretted for a long time missing the initial run. It's so well put together. It's so functional. It's so enjoyable. Now, I will say, if you want one, you're going to have to. Um, you're going to have to follow Brian on Instagram. Probably that'd be the best way to do it. There may be a sign up for an email on his website. I'm not sure. But the other thing I should say in finishing this whole thing off is, well, we've been talking about paying more. The ask on these in terms of price is not that crazy. I think these were $325 or $350 for a knife that is absolutely stunning and misses very few things, right? Like there's not a lot that I would want to change about this knife. In fact, only the one thing that I kind of brought up there with the pivot. To get that much good in a design that looks as amazing as this, I would pay, you know, Brian could have, I think, asked 4 or 425 for these, and people would have paid it. I don't know if I would have, but it certainly, I think, could be justified. So there you go, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Let me know what motivates you to spend a little more on a knife down in the comments below, and let me know if there's something that you kind of pick on, like the pivots that I kind of made a little bit of an issue out in this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.